exciting to be here. The opportunity to have a conversation about medical marijuana and how it relates to our city in a permissive structure. So I just wanted to introduce the panel, and I thought what we would do here is, from a structure of the dialogue, is to start at a very, very high level. We'll start with what's going on at the state, what has the state done, what statewide initiative are we going to see, and what's that going to look like. Then we'll start to look at, from a Board of Equalization perspective, what does it look like there, how is it going to be taxed, and then we'll dovetail into the specific and look to Mayor Pro Tem Righeimer to kind of give us some insights as to what his philosophy was in regulating a controversial and potentially nuisance use and the benefits of how he structured this ordinance. So with that, Aaron, I thought we'd start with yourself. You are an attorney.
My name's Aaron Lachant. I'm a partner at Nelson Hardiman. We are a healthcare law firm in Los Angeles. About 7 years ago, we as a firm made the conscious decision to get involved with representing medical marijuana providers and help them to comply with state law. We represent all sorts of healthcare providers, from solo physicians all the way up to big hospital chains, and we made the determination that medical marijuana providers, when authorized and licensed appropriately, are no different than any other highly regulated healthcare business within the state. So we have been in this space for a number of years now, and at the state level, things are very interesting. We're in a state of flux. California in 1996 was the first state to recognize medical marijuana use for medical purposes with the passage of the Compassionate Use Act. At the time, it was a very groundbreaking law. It was the first in the country, and since then, 24 other states have joined California, as well as the District of Columbia. That being said, California's medical marijuana laws are very, very antiquated. Because they were the first and they weren't updated by the legislature in any meaningful way, the laws didn't really anticipate the current state of affairs that we have right now, primarily cannabis businesses, these legitimate medical marijuana businesses that are serving a large number of folks in the community. When the laws were originally passed, it was a very compassionate law where it was meant for patients to grow their own marijuana, or a primary caregiver to have a little marijuana garden for their patient at the time. The laws never really anticipated what we have right now. Finally, last year, the state legislature stepped in and they caught up with the other states in the country and passed comprehensive medical marijuana regulations, the State Medical Marijuana Regulatory and Safety Act. And this was the state's efforts to legitimize this as a licensable business. This is a real industry in California, and it was going to provide the oversight and guidance that cities across the state were asking for. Because the original laws were so vague, it left a lot of the regulation to the cities rather than the state. The state didn't have comprehensive rules about any of this. So now that we have, for the first time, a state medical marijuana regulatory scheme, it's slated to take effect for licensing purposes January 1st, 2018. And it creates a board within the Department of Consumer Affairs. The Department of Consumer Affairs regulates all sorts of licensed professions: doctors, chiropractors, nurses. It creates a board for medical marijuana within the Department of Consumer Affairs, and that board, along with Food and Agriculture and Department of Public Health, will be responsible for licensing all types of medical marijuana related businesses. Now, just because we have a state law that says we want to regulate these businesses now, it doesn't open the door for marijuana businesses to take over every city. In order to get a state marijuana license, a medical marijuana business will need a local permit. So there is still a tremendous amount of local control over how many of these businesses are going to be allowed in, what types of businesses. For the first time, the state has broken it down into different types of licenses: storefront dispensaries, cultivation sites where the marijuana is actually grown, manufacturers who take the raw marijuana or cannabis and transform it into some sort of refined or finished product, lab testing to make sure that the products are clean and free of mold and pesticides, transportation businesses who will transport the marijuana from all the different licensed providers, and distributors who are responsible for tracking and packaging everything that goes on within the state so that the State Board of Equalization can collect the appropriate taxes on the marijuana that's being bought and sold within the state. It's a really great system. It's just in its infancy of being implemented. The state hired Lori Ajax, who is from ABC, to administer the program. And they are, from what I understand, they're working hard on putting together these regulations that will not only control licensing, but also dictate how these business operates. They'll create operational regulations as well. And this program is expected to take effect by January 1st, 2018. So while all that is happening, a bunch of folks across the state got together and said, let's take...
Are you going to take us, now you've given us the state view, where the legislature has acted to bring some regulatory schemes. Are you now going to take us into November 18th?
I'll touch upon it. So while we have this medical marijuana program, like full medical marijuana program being designed and implemented and rolled out for the first time, a bunch of people across the state came together and said, well, let's put together a recreational marijuana program. The the adult use marijuana program, Amendment 64, it's very similar to the existing medical marijuana program that's in place. It keeps regulatory control within the same agencies. It creates additional taxes, which will be on the businesses and the end user, or not the end user, but on the businesses along the chain that will be explained in greater detail later on. And for all intents and purposes, it will allow folks who are age 21 or older to purchase marijuana for adult use, to possess marijuana for adult use without being subject to an infraction, and to grow up to 6 marijuana plants for their own personal use within their home. Just wanted to make sure. It follows the same system that local governments will control what degree they want this type of activity within their jurisdiction. In other words, cities will maintain the authority to ban certain marijuana uses if they want to, and they'll maintain the authority to license and regulate and authorize marijuana uses. And just like the medical marijuana program, the adult use program will require a local authorization in order to get a local permit, or to get a state license. The main message with both of these programs is the state has recognized them, and they are giving a lot of control to the local cities to determine to what degree they want the programs implemented.
Thank you. In reviewing your background, you have an interesting background on two fronts. Here in Costa Mesa, we're obviously debating the medical marijuana, but you also work with sober living homes. Costa Mesa has a proliferation of sober living homes, and I was wondering if you could speak to those in the audience that might have a concern that enabling cannabis regulatory schemes would exacerbate the proliferation of our sober living homes. Any thoughts or comments on that?
So it's an interesting topic. I know that sober living homes and residential drug treatment facilities are a big issue down here. As many of you know, under state law, sober living homes and residential treatment facilities with 6 or fewer patients who are living together are considered a single family use, and thus they have popped up all throughout Southern California. We work with a number of those folks and we've learned that the majority of their patients are there for reasons other than marijuana. Primarily, they're there for opiate use. Opiate use is the #1 driver of patients in those programs. Very few people are being treated in a residential setting for marijuana use. So the concern that somehow licensing medical marijuana businesses or adult use businesses is going to lead to an increase of residential treatment centers or sober living is not a strong argument, because marijuana patients aren't being treated in those types of facilities.
Outstanding, thank you. So what we had is a discussion about what's going on at the state level, both with our legislature as well as through ballot initiatives that we'll all be voting on November 8th. Dovetailing now, Lisa, so you're with the Board of Equalization under Vice Chair Harkey. Thank you for being here. And so tell us, there is an opportunity to not only regulate this industry, but also tax it. Are we going to solve our unfunded pension liabilities? Are we going to be able to hire more cops and firemen? Is everything going to be great now that we're considering regulating medical marijuana?
Well, I'll answer that question, but I'm going to be very careful in answering, because I'm not here to give you an opinion. I'm giving just the facts for you to determine what to do. Really quickly, I've been with the Board of Equalization 28 years. I ran the audit program in Orange County, so I have dealt with medical marijuana businesses. Many of that was before this last year when they started, when it was basically legalized to operate. But we did operate it because in California, all sales are subject to tax. Whatever it is, if it's tangible personal property, subject to tax. Because marijuana, whether it was medical, recreational, or otherwise, was illegal, we did not let people have permits. In 2005, we started having permits and let anyone come in and get a seller's permit. Through that process, we did have, I believe, 1,263 people came forward, got permits. Last year, we collected $48 million in tax revenue. That went into the general fund, and that would answer your question for how it's been. If Prop 64 passes, it's going to be a little different. There's going to be additional taxes added, and excise taxes and sales taxes. So did you want me to go into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with Prop 64, it's going to make some changes. As mentioned, it's going to have, the new agency was created, and within that agency, a new fund was created. And all the revenue derived from the medical marijuana, excise taxes and sales taxes, will not go into the general fund, rather they'll go into this fund and this new fund. And so all the money will go into the fund, and there's different ways they'll spend that money, but that's where all the funds will go. So it will not go into the general fund, which is what I think some people hope for. There will be a cultivation tax that's going to be enacted. It'll be $9.25 on flowers per ounce. It'll be $2.75 per ounce for leaves. I don't personally know the difference between leaves and flowers, but I'm sure someone will. These amounts for those taxes, the cultivation fees will go directly into that fund I talked about. There will be a 15% excise tax on the gross receipts from the sale of marijuana by the retailer. That'll be right at the retail level. They will charge that 15%, well, they'll owe it, but they'll charge it from their customers. That 15% will come in and go to that special fund. They will also, for recreational sales, they will collect sales tax on all of those sales. That will give 1% back to the local jurisdiction where the place of sale is. So if Costa Mesa has a medical marijuana retailer, they would get 1% back of all the gross sales of recreational. That sales tax will be on top of the excise tax. So yes, there's a tax on tax. For medical marijuana sales, the proposition does exempt those, so there will be no sales tax on medical marijuana sales. So anyone that has a medical marijuana card can buy their marijuana without sales tax. And
Is there an excise tax?
the excise tax will be on the medical marijuana. So there will be that tax. But as far as, what will go into the local coffers, which I think a lot of people really care about because the cities run on that money, will be on the recreational marijuana sales or adult use or whatever term is being used.
Thank you very much. So one of the things I think we need to recognize is that cannabis and marijuana has a presence in our community today, even though it's unregulated. So it's referred to as the black market. Has the BOE looked at any studies of what happens when the state and local municipalities regulate the industry, kind of try and bring it out? How does that work versus the black market?
I work for Diane Harkey, who's the vice chair of the Board of Equalization. She's a former city council member of Dana Point, former assembly member for three terms, and a banker in the beginning of her career. So she really was focused on this new regulation because the Board of Equalization doesn't make laws, but we have to administer all taxes and fees. So she has made this kind of it's my project, and there's an attorney in Sacramento, and that both of us, we're the pot queens, and it's kind of funny because both of us are not really that knowledgeable. We weren't knowledgeable about marijuana in the past. But one thing we did notice is we started looking into the people that have permits. Are people in our communities already complying? We have had issues with audits where there's no books and records. The good part about this new regulation, this law does, and also the laws enacted in January, was you have to keep books and records. So these businesses are going to have to legitimize and have books and records. And I believe all of the firms that you were speaking of that you represent are those legitimate businesses. But that's one of the problems we had when we audit people. They didn't have books and records. They didn't have any amounts. We've also looked into who's collecting the tax, these people that have permits. We have found most of the people that have these permits in cities are reporting $0 tax. So we're hoping we can bring them into compliance, and that's what our audit program is for. The big issue that we see is the problems with the underground economy. That would be the drug dealers that you think about when you hear of drug dealer. Those would be the illegal black market, the cartels. We don't believe they're going to stop selling marijuana because we've legalized it. We found that in Southern California, most of the money raised by gangs are in drugs. We have I've got a map that put out by the Attorney General showing that San Bernardino, Los Angeles, Riverside, and Orange County have the most amount of gangs in the state of California. So we're very concerned about that black market and what it's going to do when we have the increased competition. We're going to be taxing marijuana, legal marijuana. Well, that's just going to increase the price. When prices go up, are people going to go to the black market? That's a very big concern we have. And a concern they found, we started looking into Colorado, because although Colorado only has 5 million people and we have 38 million people, so we don't really think we're comparable, we thought we'd look at it. And Colorado had an increase of people growing marijuana and transporting it out of the state. So they're not getting that excise tax. We're already worried about marijuana coming into California from Mexico, and we're kind of a drug thoroughfare to take out of the state through our borders. So we're worried about that already, and then now if we're gonna have legal, are we gonna have access to that? So we're trying to really wonder how we're going to enforce this and make sure people are paying their taxes. We're concerned also that there may not be enough law enforcement money in Southern California because most of this law has been written, well, the laws, not just this law, I'm saying laws in general, have been written for Northern California and their issues. In Southern California, we think we're different. And we pretty much know we're different. We are not the Emerald Triangle with lots of space where you can grow big plantations of marijuana. We're going to be having grow houses. There's a lot more water. I just read a study that there's more water used to grow a pot plant than a grape plant. So my boss is worried about water and how we're going to handle that. Although it's not a tax issue, it's just something she's bringing up. How are we going to handle it? How are our auditors going to handle it? So it's something we're really working on. So going back to your question, since I kind of digressed here. The black market is a big consideration. We have had problems with local, in Santa Ana, I think there was a shop keeper who wouldn't buy from the illegal cartel, and he was taken out to the desert and shot. Very concerning to us. We talked to the district attorney, he's concerned about it. So keeping out the illegal business would be something that would be very important to us.
Excellent. And how about you can't bank this industry right now, so it's an all cash business. What about those who might have a concern that says, although they're mandated to have books, there could be potentially two sets of books, one for the owner and one for the tax man. How do you handle cash businesses? Do you audit? Do you have means and mechanisms to get your fair share?
There have been, since the beginning of time, once you made a tax, there are people that know how to cheat. So marijuana is no different than any other business as far as having the cash businesses. Your sandwich shop, your restaurants are cash businesses. So we have our, I laugh, we have our ways to audit you. We have different ways to audit as long as we have access to some system of purchases and sales. Right now in the medical marijuana, I'm saying medical marijuana just as marijuana, the marijuana business doesn't have a track and trace system in the past to know what you purchased. Everything they purchased was in cash, they sold in cash. Now with the new legislation out of January, there's a track and trace program where everyone must, it's a regulated process that everything's registered from from the grower to the wholesaler to the retailer. So if we have access to purchases, that will help us. Because if you need something to start with, other than, currently, one activity we do in marijuana shops is we just sit there and count the sales.
And they do it.
The
They do it a
problem is
lot.
our employees aren't comfortable with it. Many employees aren't comfortable sitting there. They're worried about their safety. They're worried about, they don't understand marijuana, so they're scared to do the audits. So it's been very difficult to audit them, but hopefully with books and records, they'll have them in the future. So what we want is books and records. I think we want books and records for every business. So you watch our,
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Just procedurally, we'll start talking a little bit about Costa Mesa in specific. We'll allow the panel to kind of banter back and forth and share a little bit more of their information. Then we'll open it up to the group for questions that you guys might have. So if you told me 2 years ago that Mayor Pro Tem Righeimer would be the council champion of a regulatory scheme on marijuana, I would have told you that you were high. But here we are today. And so Mayor Pro Tem Righeimer, I wonder if you walk us through this, unpack kind of how we got here. What was your thought process? On one hand, you have the advocates for the industry championing safe access from a medicinal perspective. On the other hand, you have residents that are concerned, want to seek to continue a prohibitionist type of mentality. And how do you balance those two competing interests? Kind of walk us through your thought process here in Costa Mesa.
Okay, so you kind of got to get up to about a 30,000 foot level and decide what a city can or cannot do, what's actually happening out there in society, what's going to move forward, and with all those things, make decisions based on that. And so what my personal feelings are about marijuana is not something that I have to bring in or should bring in when we look at where we're at. So here's where we're at. A couple years ago, two separate groups put together initiatives. They collected signatures to put on the ballot to sell medical marijuana in Costa Mesa. As was said earlier, it's up to the cities to decide whether they want to do it or not. Well, the citizens of a city can decide they want to do it and put something on the ballot. And so 2 years ago, that's what happened. So the city of Costa Mesa was in play at that point. We were able to stand back and look at it, and we made the arguments that said, listen, there's a tax here, and if there's a tax, you can't have a special election. You've got to go at a normal election, which is coming up here in November. You just can't have it at any time, and you have to have an election when people on the council are being voted in. So everybody kind of knows where everybody stands on those issues. So quite frankly, that bought us some time, because my whole point from day one was you can write down anything you want, an initiative, and have all the residents sign it. And it's all interesting, but none of it's enforceable. And the reality of it is cities do not have the police powers that, say, the ABC has, the Alcohol Beverage Control, or the Bureau of Medical Marijuana, we call it BUMMER, has. We don't have police powers. We can give you a code enforcement ticket. That's all we can do. We found out a few years ago when a couple of medical marijuana places were open in the city. Our city said, you can't do that. You didn't get permission. You're not allowed to do that. There's about 7 or 8 of them. We went into litigation. We were $500,000 in litigation. There was 50, 60 open by that time. It's kind of like they just bum rushed the city, and you can't even fight them anymore. There's so much money involved. It was interesting. The FBI came in. They have asset forfeiture federal laws that I'm not real happy with, quite frankly. But they told property owners they'll take your building tomorrow if you don't close this down, and all of them closed down immediately. So understand that's kind of the position that we're at. We have things going on the ballot. This is out of our control, and it's going to happen. And if you poll people and you say there are people that need medical marijuana for epilepsy or all sorts of things, people say, I'm voting for it. So now you're going to have it. So you're in a situation where it's going to be in your city. And I love the favorite line people would say, our city needs to get out in front of this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to get behind everybody else and let them get run over by the train. Because we have no police powers to really do anything. I don't say we have none, but practically speaking, we don't have it. I really want to have other cities kind of figure it out. Santa Ana, they went through the process. They went through a lottery process. They're still in litigation. They're bringing in millions of dollars, and it'll probably 100% be used up by law enforcement to try to control and operate this system. So this whole idea there's this massive amount of money that's going to come in and solve all your problems, I don't think it's true. I think it's like most anything, marijuana, alcohol, all sorts of things are paid for with disposable dollars, and those disposable dollars you're not going to spend at the movie theater, you're going to spend buying beer or wine or whatever, and then tax-wise to the state, I don't think there'll be any big deal, especially if all the states do it. But again, with that all in place, and knowing this was coming and it was going to be voted on, it was incumbent upon the city council to say, we need to put some rules in place. Understand, these initiatives are written with all this happy talk in it. Like, we're going to make sure that, it's no pesticides and it has certain levels of THC and all these kind of things. Folks, we are a city. We have a hard time with curbs and gutters. We don't have people in white jackets testing marijuana and labeling it and all these kind of things that to get a thing passed, you say, we're going to have all these rules, but there's no way to enforce it. What we were hanging on for and waiting for was the state to finally wake up, the legislature, not the employees, but the legislature to say, oh, maybe we ought to get some rules in place here and put together a bureau like they have for alcohol and beverage control. Now, if you've never gotten a liquor license or had a place involved or even did, a fundraiser event where you had to get your license to sell your beer at the church bazaar, it's a pretty complicated process. You may say it's bureaucratic, but there's reasons for it. The reason is, number one, they want to collect the tax. And so we use a system in the state of California, which is a distributor system, where the 100,000 7-Elevens don't pay the tax. And the guys who make all the beer and the alcohol don't pay the tax. The distributor collects the money and pays the tax. And how many distributors are in the state?
2.
It's like 50?
Not that many, no.
51? Not even that many?
For beer and alcohol?
Yeah.
I thought it was 2.
No,
No, there's more than that.
there's at least 2 in Orange County.
Yeah, there's 200. So let's call it 50. You can collect 50 checks. Okay, as a state, you can collect 100,000, which is the easiest way. You go to the distributor model, and that's the direction that what I've seen is where marijuana is going to go. That you can't have all the guys growing it pay the tax, and you can't have all the stores that sell it, but the distributors in the middle, they can do it. Okay, so now you know all those things. The train's coming down Costa Mesa. We have 2 initiatives on the ballot. One says 4 medical marijuana places in your city. One says 8. And there's a lot of things in it that the citizens lose complete control of and how to operate. And we're doing it before the state has things in place. Now, it's getting closer, but we're still ahead of it. If I had my druthers, I would like this thing to be put away until the state has more things in place. I'm not looking to be the first one there. But we don't have that choice. An initiative with signatures was brought into our city. That initiative would not happen in Irvine. It wouldn't happen in Newport. It's not going to happen in Huntington Beach. Most cities are not going to have marijuana. Understand that. No matter how anybody talks about, citizens aren't going to vote for it in many, many cities. They just won't vote for it. The elected officials aren't going to vote for it. People that want these places are going to put initiatives in cities they think they can pass them, and that's what they've done. Now, there's a whole nother inside baseball to who puts up the money for those things and how they happen, but I do think there are people that need medical marijuana for very important reasons. I think there's some research that needs to be done that's very hard to get done because of the laws that, pharmaceutical companies can't even research the stuff without getting an act of Congress passed. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. But there's just really a lot of money to be made here. And so understand that the compassionate part's how you sell it, but this is really about making a lot of money, a ton of money, of which we don't have a lot of control of. So if it was, again, up to me, I'd push it forward. So now, where are we at today? Santa Ana right next door has it, having their problems, but it's kind of working its way through. It's handling there. They put it in the industrial areas, those type of things. And we have this initiative coming at us. At that point, the city council says we need to do a competing initiative. And the point of it is we need to do it, now that we know 2 are on the ballot, they're going to pass. I mean, you do the polling, they're going to pass. We need to put something on there to say, hey, we can solve some of the issues that people are looking for in the community, but at least have some controls. And also have a situation where these initiatives were all done that once it's in place, city council can't pass an ordinance to get rid of it later. Ours is in place to the point of saying we can work with these things as we figure out what's going to happen. If the public wants it in the end, the public's going to get it. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. but we can't have something that we're kind of naked mechanically, legally, to be able to control these businesses, just like we control, a manufacturer makes loud noises. I mean, there's just certain things that we have to have some control to operate in cities. So here we are. We put together an initiative, and here's what the initiative says. The initiative says that you can do a medical marijuana-related business north of the 405 freeway, actually north of South Coast Drive, but I'll just say the 405 because that's what everybody knows, west of Harbor Boulevard, back up in that whole area behind SoCo where it's all industrial area. It's actually right next to Santa Ana that does sell it in their industrial area that backs up to our number one. Number two, you can do manufacturing, you can do processing, you can do research and development. We do not have in our initiative that you can do retail sales yet. What we do say is that once the state passes the law, we will then bring a separate ordinance together to handle that. But we are not looking to get out in front of anybody's train. What we're saying is, yes, we're going to, and quite frankly, cities do not have, there is a need for processing. And nobody even knows how to handle that. They're like, well, do I get the dispensary license or what do I have? And so we're saying right up front, we're going to treat you like Allergan or any other company. There's no special, you can have a conditional use permit, but if you manufacture something, oils or the candies or the lozenges or whatever is needed in that industry out there, you can manufacture them in our town. You can't sell them. You can't sell them to the retail business. You can do it to wholesale. Any kind of processing you can do. Research and development. The phone calls that I had from executives of pharmaceutical companies who literally flat out said, we want to work on some uses of marijuana for medicinal purposes. We will not do that in a city that doesn't have some rules, because we cannot have the local police chief walk in and say, you have 50 pounds of marijuana, we're taking your $50 million lab. We're just not going to do that. So if you can look where Costa Mesa is putting themselves in, we're putting ourselves in the position of saying, the buildings and the operations that will happen in Costa Mesa, you'll have people wearing white lab coats, more white lab coats than jeans, blue jeans, okay? It's just going to be a different come from in it. Now, once ABC's got everything done, or the Bureau of Medical Marijuana got it set up in there, and the taxes are structured in there, we'll be in a better position. And we think the citizens of Costa Mesa, and we hope, will look at us for doing that. Now, what's interesting about it is the two groups that put together the initiatives, one for 8 and one for 2, one for 8 locations and one for 4 locations, the one that did the 8, in their arguments for the ballot said, we agree with the city of Costa Mesa. You should vote for the cities. We don't want you to vote for ours anymore. The reality of it is there are places to buy it already now, okay? So do we need to have one next door today? Probably not. But do they need manufacturing right now? Yeah. Do they need processing right now? Do they need research and development right now? Yes, they need all those things. So in there, if you look on when the arguments come out, the people that did it, who raised the money and collected the signatures, are saying, vote for the city of Costa Mesas. Don't vote for ours, which I think really was, again, that time period that we had to work with these groups, because there are people who got signatures that are very passionate about medical marijuana, about kids with seizures, about things that really mattered, and we were open enough to talk to them and say, I hear what you're saying and I want to help you with that, but we don't have rules in place to regulate this. If we just let one open up, then it's Katie bar the door, you're going to have all these places open up. And so we got enough time. Other cities have opened it. And so now, again, what we're going to have is we're going to have something that says you can do the manufacturing it, you can do the transportation, you can do the processing, you can do the packaging. But if it passes, immediately you're not going to have a dispensary. That's just not going to happen. But after the laws, the polls show that the other marijuana, recreational, is going to pass. Once that,
Adult use?
I love all the words, adult use, yeah. I never had a beer till I was 21, okay? I mean, I just got to tell you. Listen, it is what it is. Society goes a certain direction, and you need to kind of catch up with it. I do not think we have to be out ahead of this thing, and let's open them all up and see how it works. As a city, we've got enough issues to solve before we try to do that. So where we're at, again, is that goes on the ballot. We think that we've got a very good possibility of passing. I think the citizens in Costa Mesa are very compassionate about this. That we are a compassionate community about whether it's the homeless issues or whatever else. We care about people in this community. And I think they'll know that we're going the right direction. I think we can get the votes for people that are, probably just saying, I'm absolutely against this in no way whatsoever, are at least going to say, well, I may not be for this at all, but I better at least vote for the city's one, which is going to, one of these are going to pass. Vote for the city's one that at least have some controls and can operate these things properly, or the other two that really don't have the controls. I think we have a really good chance of passing it. And then we'll kind of, go from there, but it'll be in a more measured way to go forward. And understand, again, it's like every other issue in the community, whether it's the group home issues or all that. People in Costa Mesa are compassionate. We want to help people. But we're not taking the load on for everybody. I'm telling you right now, I do a lot of business in Colorado, and they can talk about, marijuana is everywhere. It's not. There are cities that say you are absolutely not going to have a medical marijuana, and there's tons of them. So suburban kind of cities just don't allow it, and yet you don't see it in their town. They may have medical somewhere in their industrial area, but they don't have it. Yeah, Boulder's going to have it, Denver's going to have it. The more liberal communities may end up having it, but most suburban towns just don't. I may be wrong with the word most. A lot don't have it. And Orange County's going to be no different. You start taking, Yorba Linda's never going to pass it. Irvine's never going to pass it. Laguna Beach is probably going to pass it. San Clemente, it's never going to happen. I mean, let's talk reality here. People say, I don't want it in my town. And when I say you don't want your town, I'm not saying in the next 100 years, maybe 10 years from now, it'll be okay. But in the beginning, it's not. And again, I want to make sure that we're just not the only city doing it, that everybody takes their kind of fair share. I wouldn't want to be the only town in Orange County that sells alcohol either. Everybody's got to kind of spread it out and make sure that we don't have massive impacts for it. So that's kind of where we're at, and be glad to banter back and
Thank
forth
you.
about where it's at.
We always forget what it's like to give Mayor Pro Tem an open mic here. So thank you for that. So if some look at this ordinance one way and say, wow, Costa Mesa missed an opportunity to introduce both the dispensary for retail and cultivation. You look at it another way and say, some say that this is leadership policy. South of Oakland, it's really the only city that has tackled kind of the back door of how it gets to a dispensary. How is it tested? How is it transported? How did all those things happen for medicine? So any early feedback from the citizenry? Did you get the balance right? Are they accepting?
I'll tell you, I think it's very polarized. There are people absolutely do not want it. I'm going to tell you that people with kids in school and high school and all that, when we had all the medical marijuana dispensaries, when they were illegal, they had them. We had more problems in the high schools with marijuana. We just did. To say we didn't would not be true. And so it's a big issue of how we're going to solve that. It's coming, bud. So it's going to be here. I guess I want to make sure that we're not the first ones out there to tackle it. I will say that there is a revenue side of it, how we're doing it right now, because the revenue, and I think it's a business tax, and don't ask me if it's legal or not because I don't understand all the rules, but our lawyers go through all of it. But it's like 6% of the sale, and if we're doing manufacturing, the dispensaries is where you're going to have a lot of the law enforcement issues. Manufacturing, people in white coats, not much law enforcement is necessary, and yet it's a 6%.
Gross.
As far as the buying the equipment, the tax on the equipment?
No.
Okay.
No, we're talking
The
about
sales to the dispensaries.
Sales, I think they did it under a business or something, I'm not sure.
I'm not positive.
It's a local tax.
Yeah.
Well, I
You
know
could be right.
when you set up the business itself, there are the equipment costs, and so people are very excited about you mentioned $50 million, but they can buy all that without tax.
Anyway.
Anyways.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as all the taxes are on the retailer. Other than the cultivation tax, all the excise taxes and the sales taxes are going to be on the actual person that's selling to the customers.
The state taxes are going to be on
And
those.
say the
state
excise
taxes.
taxes as well.
Right.
The cultivation taxes.
We don't,
So none of those,
we don't see, there could be, we don't see necessarily cultivation happening because
It's not
the
allowed.
reality of it is, buying buildings and and growing it, you can do it a lot cheaper in Mexico, so.
well, the funds you may not get any funds from the tax revenue from it.
Right.
But you probably weren't going to get those funds anyways.
Right.
Since they're going to a special fund, they're not going to the general
Right,
fund.
right.
So,
Great, thank you. So Aaron, you have experience working with the industry. As cities have come up with a permissive structure and have implemented and stores and uses have opened, what's been your experience? Any feedback for residents that would want to kind of know what life looks like after November 8th?
Sure. Well, there's two things I want to touch on. I want to go back just to the proposed initiative from the city. I think it's a great initiative. I think it's different from a lot of cities. Most places across the state have tackled dispensaries with mixed results. They're just starting to get on the issue of cultivation. I actually like the fact that you're going around dispensaries and cultivation altogether because distributors, lab testing, transportation companies, manufacturing, these are all key pieces to making the state system work, where the vast majority of cities aren't thinking about those issues right now. There's only a handful of cities that have put forward ordinances that regulate those types of uses. And I believe Costa Mesa, if it passes, would be the first in Southern California to have a process to establish a distributorship. That's great if Santa Ana wants to have their dispensaries, but come 2018, there's going to be no marijuana on the shelves unless there's a distributor nearby who can take it through the testing process, certify it, package it, and report the sale to the Board of Equalization. So even though there's no cultivation and no dispensing, which is what most people think about with a medical marijuana law, this is a great ordinance for ancillary businesses, and to the extent there's ever a local tax on it, when the state system is implemented, these products can be sold across the state. They're not going to end up within your backyard. There's going to be no dispensaries in Costa Mesa for the products to go to. They'll only be able to go to licensed facilities across the state, so there shouldn't be any impact.
Well, unless the ordinance came later.
Unless
then we
there's
would
a
have
future
it. But
ordinance
I
that
think
would allow for
We just want to
dispensing.
make sure the state's got their stuff all ducks in a row, and we have a process before we do that.
So as far as our experience, we've worked with regulated businesses across the state. We've worked in Los Angeles, Malibu, San Diego, Palm Springs, West Hollywood, helping businesses get permits or provide ongoing advice. Once they're licensed and permitted, they just become part of the community. It's very interesting in the sense that we've seen many ecosystems sprout up around a legal dispensary in a blighted area. Because they are such an attraction to members in the community. Once the legal dispensary is there and they get a fair amount of traffic coming to it, the a sandwich or coffee shop will open next door, and all these other businesses, open up around the area and around the dispensary, and it improves the area overall. Another thing is it actually decreases crime. Whether or not it's the presence of cameras on the businesses that keep track of the street or the increased patrol from law enforcement based on fears of something happening at the dispensary, having licensed and legal marijuana businesses have been an improvement for many areas within cities we've had clients.
Great, thank you. So a little bit of current events. First of all, I'm pleased that the statewide regulatory schemes have allowed provisions for local control. That's very, very important. But for this crowd who wants and believes in smaller government, it's interesting today that our federal government today said that the DEA is not going to reclassify cannabis because it has no medicinal value. But in that same brushstroke of legislative action, they are freeing up opportunities to test and prove whether cannabis, marijuana, does have beneficial medicinal uses, and a lot of that may occur here in Costa Mesa. Okay, before we kind of throw it over to the crowd for any questions that you might have, kind of get ready for those. Panel, any kind of cleanup issues that you heard somebody else speak of that you wish you'd said when you were giving your intro? Anything you guys wanted to add?
the one thing I'd like to add is the Board of Equalization is worried about the fact that the banking issue is that the medical marijuana businesses, it's still illegal in United States to sell marijuana. The banking industry is very wary of getting involved and having any, some people can get bank accounts, but they lose the bank accounts. It's been very difficult for the operations to obtain legal ways of turning their cash into a check. That means that when the time comes for them to pay their taxes, they're going to be paying in cash. We have been cashless for years. We are now trying to find a way of how we're going to handle all this cash coming in. Recently, someone brought in $400,000 to make their payment. We don't have a room big enough to count $400,000. We don't have employees that have been trained to count money. We have little cash counting machines, they just can't handle it. So we're looking into purchasing those items and developing security measures, because we're frankly worried that someone's bringing in $400,000 into our office in Irvine. Their safety, someone knowing they're coming, someone putting a gun to one of our employees' heads and insisting on coming in and taking it, or perhaps when, having the armored transports. When you have someone count that much cash, they have to count it. They can't go to the bathroom, they can't go to lunch, they got to count it. So we need to have staff and trained and, they're fingerprinted, but we probably need more training than that just to count money and account for that. So it's something we're very concerned about. It's something that really hasn't been answered. We've been researching and talking about what kind of institutions can help us to collect this money, maybe not have it, other facilities where you go and drop off your cash so it's not at our public office, some secure location, but it's something we're looking into. And it's one of the main concerns that my boss has and I have, and being that I've worked in a district office for 28 years, is how we can talk about taking all this money, but how are we really going to do it? And so that's our problem at the Board of Equalization, not your problem. If you ever did have dispensaries in your city, it would be a problem for you to, how are you going to collect that cash and handle that cash? It would be really easy if I thought that, this problem is going to be solved by the federal government, but I don't see it being happening anytime soon. So it's something that we're really concerned about, the fact that it's unbankable.
Excellent. Aaron, any unintended consequences, anecdotes?
I think I'm good for now.
Good for now?
Yeah.
Okay. Jim, you're good for now?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, Santa Ana had to work through a lot of issues, and that one issue, when they went through their rules, one of their rules was, you can have security, but no armed guards. And they just said, then they had a robbery or whatever, and excuse me, you can have armed guards. You have a lot of cash here, of course. They have to have armed guards there. So they have them now, but these are the things that you have to work through. And like I said, I'd like a lot of their cities to kind of, plow the way for us before we have to jump full into it. And I think this was a good middle road to get people what they wanted. And a political issue of it's going to pass anyway. Can we get the cities ones to pass? Because we're doing the things that the medical really needed in the medical marijuana world, where you're talking about people with medical issues that really need it, not just somebody says I got a migraine today, or I'm stressed today, and I get a medical marijuana thing and I'm just buying it anyway. So I think we did the right thing, and we'll see in November if the community agrees with us.
Great. Thank you, panel. I just wanted to recognize a couple people who have joined us. Councilmember Scott Piotr from Newport Beach is in the room. Always great to see policymakers here getting informed. Let's see, we have Mayor Mensinger from the great city of Costa Mesa here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see the chairman of our planning commission, Rob Dixon, who's here with his beautiful daughter. I see a future council member, Lee Ramos, who's in the room here, trying to get educated on the subject. Also wanted to point out two gentlemen over here, Randall Longwith and Robert Taft. Two guys, as we wrap up here, that you might want to get with. They are in the industry. They have brought one of the initiatives, are supporting the city initiatives, and it might be great to get their perspective on how they're thinking about all these things. All right, so, here we go. How did we do? Any questions here? If you could share them, I'll try and repeat them so that everybody can hear.
I liked the presentation. I think they all did a very good job. And when we are at a town hall meeting or something like that, it always amazes me what a singular focus people have, and how, they just don't seem to realize what it takes to run a city, for heaven's sakes. This is more than your little backyard thing. But there are
items that came out in each one of the panelists that I never thought of before. Like, for instance, taking the cash. And I did know that. I'd heard, from the Colorado scene that it wasn't bankable. And so what do you do with that? What I would like to know, my little question is for Lisa, is it Lisa? Who decides what that fund is going to be named and where that money goes? And when is that going to happen?
It's not the Board of Equalization. That fund has already been created, and that was through the legislation that passed at the beginning of the year. AB 266, AB 243, and AB 643. So that fund is called, I can get the official name of the fund. I think I wrote it down. It's called the Marijuana Control Fund, is what it's called. And it'll be run by the new agency. I think that, I laughed that you called it bummer. It was funny. Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation is what they're actually called. And that that fund will be in their monies. If I can tell you where all the money is going. The money is going into the fund, and then they're going to disperse funds out of that. 4% will go to the Board of Equalization to administer the taxes and fees, doing all the collection. They'll give $10 million annually to the public California universities to study marijuana for public safety issues, criminal impacts. They'll give $3 million a year to the California Highway Patrol to establish protocols to determine whether someone is impaired while driving with marijuana. Although I did talk to a CHP officer who said they can tell, but apparently they're going to come up with better ways. A legal method of testing. $10 million annually, increasing to $10 million every year until it hits $50 million annually to the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. That's called GoBiz. They help new businesses establish, help them grow and help them get tax credits. They'll also give $2 million annually to the University of San Diego for Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research. I don't know why they got such little money compared to the other ones, but they get $2 million. And then from there, there's going to be the little bit left over. It'll start at $25 million, they hope, up to $75 million. 60% will go to youth education, 20% will go to state and local government to use for highway patrol training programs, highway patrol, nonprofit organizations for educations to schools, and then finally to local governments that do have dispensaries. They'll get some public funding. So that's where the money is going.
Thank you. Love that you're able to share lots of facts. Yes, Corky.
Yeah, well, I have a puzzlement. I guess I'm ignorant about marijuana, but I'm curious, what is it that caused these people that I guess are alcoholics or tobacco or whatever, why would they want to go to marijuana? What's the difference? And then after that, they've discovered this medical advantage of it, and I've never seen anything that explains to me what it is about marijuana that's to a medical advantage.
Anybody want to take that?
I'll take a crack at answering it. Anecdotally, marijuana has been reported to be good for a number of conditions, palliative conditions, patients who are undergoing extreme pain. It's been anecdotally reported to help patients with nausea while receiving chemotherapy, and it's been extensively reported that it reduces the number of seizures. Even in children who have seizures disorders, folks who are having dozens of seizures a day, there's a certain compound of the marijuana plant that causes it to subside. Now, we don't understand why it does all this yet because of the barrier put in place by the federal government. It's a lot of circular reasoning. The federal government's made the determination as recently as today that marijuana has no medicinal value. Therefore, it's very, very difficult to do research on it. And you have to apply to do research and get their approval. And for the most part, when folks apply, they say, well, there's no medical value to it. Why do you want to do research on it? So it's just a lot of going around in a circle, and we don't understand the science of the cannabis plant yet. As far as why people use it instead of alcohol and tobacco, I don't know why. One of the side effects is happiness and euphoria, so I think that's a big reason why people use it. You know, it's non-addictive like alcohol and tobacco, unlike alcohol and tobacco, and I know both of those industries are very concerned about marijuana being legalized for adult use. So it's,
And as it stands now, based on this regulatory act and a positive vote in November, Costa Mesa will likely be leading the way to answer that very question about what are the specific medicinal benefits. So,
I've just never seen any information provided, other than just a discussion about chloroquine, and that's about it.
Well, if I can add.
please.
I've done a lot of research. I'm, caffeine's my drug of choice, so I don't really didn't know a lot of marijuana. I've been looking into marijuana for the past year, and every website I look at, there's pro websites, anti-websites, there's people that are supposedly middle of the road. There's not one website that doesn't admit that there is some medical uses that are that are needed, that are necessary, that have been successful. The question is how much is needed, and that's where where a lot of them are, where you can do your own research. Some of them are saying that there has been an increase in people that are saying it's medical use when it's perhaps more of adult use, recreational use, whatever your term is. And so that's why, like in Colorado, they had in a 2-year period, the medical marijuana permits went from 1,000 to 108,000. And why is that? That's a huge number. And the only thing I could figure out, and I was talking this morning about it, was the fact that they didn't want to pay the sales tax.
Right.
And
It's
so,
very true.
And it's true, and in California, if you have a medical marijuana card, you will not have to pay the sales tax. And Prop 64 will cap your permit fee to $100. You can recoup your $100 fairly quickly in not paying that sales tax if you're purchasing, say an eighth a week, and that's about $60. In a few months, you will have made up that sales tax, the permit fee versus the sales tax. So I thought it was interesting that people are making an economic decision as well. Instead of just buying it recreationally, you can walk in and buy whatever you want in Denver. Why would you want that medical card and have your name everywhere? But
Thank you. Stage left.
save money.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. Don't the dispensaries and the vape shops in Santa Ana have credit card sales? I think that's,
Not that I know of.
They may have ATM machines.
Most of them have ATM, or there's a system, different financial groups that you can have a kiosk, and you put your cash in the kiosk, and then you order what you want. You bring your order slip to the front counter, and then they give you the product you want. Then a armored car comes and takes that cash and delivers it wherever the owner of the shop wants it delivered to. Currently, they would like to deliver it to the Board of Equalization, and we're holding off on that right now, and trying them to find another way.
okay.
So-
But
There may be some that accept credit cards. The problem is there's not a merchant processor that will accept credit cards because they're afraid of the federal government.
It's a creative bunch. There are some workarounds.
I thought that some dispensaries are, in fact, in Santa Ana, allowing you to buy drugs with, but the other question I have is with water. I mean, the water usage, you permit that just like you would like an arboretum, right? A place
be
where
a-
you grow trees and stuff?
That would be up to your cities.
And so the water issue really would be, I mean, if they could make more money on grass than they can growing plants for your yard, they might find some creative way to come up with their own water.
Northern
plan.
California, and part of this fund is because Northern California had a lot of water diversion and that erosion, and they had a lot of problems in Northern California and what they call the Emerald Triangle, where water was being diverted illegally, and they were having problems, and it's ruined the forest. And so that's some of the funding is going to fix all that problem in 64.
and the state law does have an environmental component that there will be regulations and restrictions about how much water cultivators will be allowed to use in connection with their operations.
Great. So question over here, and then Tom, if we could go over here. We have another question over here, and then Dorothy. And then Lee. All right. Yes.
Oh, okay. First of all, thank you, panel. Great job, lots of good information to ponder over. I, for one, am sitting here kind of with a nervous feeling pit in my stomach with the whole topic in general, because the need for medical marijuana aside, my generation through the teens began the initial marijuana thing. I grew up in Northern California, and where it started becoming very well-known and popular. I have two brothers that are dead now, beginning with marijuana, escalating to meth and various other drugs along the way. And no one will ever convince me it's not a gateway drug, that it will not allow the interest, the need for more, the need for a better high, a more exciting high, a different, whatever. Generally, people start. The question is on when are you all comfortable with the fact that allowing for 21 years old being able to go out and buy marijuana, watching the high schools, watching the availability? I mean, I don't know if it's a question or not, but I mean, this is where we're at, and it scares me to death.
So let's be honest. If there weren't two initiatives with signatures collected in Costa Mesa, I wouldn't be here today. I mean, I appreciate people saying, hey, this is great and what Costa Mesa is doing, and it's a missing link in the chain of manufacturing and all that. This is not something I was looking forward to in any way, shape, or form. I would rather it happen somewhere else. But when you just, go to reality, this is going to pass in your city, I have to look at that. I have to look at what do I think is in the best interest of the community. And the best interest of the community is for the city to have some controls of how this rolls out. And it gives people a choice. If we gave no choice, one of the two will pass. And people say, well, you can have 4 dispensaries or 8. Oh, I'll pick 4. I mean, whatever. And quite frankly, you drill into those initiatives and you find out how those signatures got funded. Because people control those 4 already, or they control the 8. They know who's going to get them based on the rules of who can get a permit. And that's probably not the right way to do it, but that's the way it was done. So knowing that, I don't disagree with anything you're saying at all as regards to whether it's a gateway or not a gateway. I think it's more likely than it's not, but, I'm not the expert. Who knows, that person wouldn't be there. But I think we do have to look at, the opiate situation that we have in this country right now. Corporations make billions of dollars selling OxyContin, and that's handled through the pharmacy. When I first ran for office, people would say, well, we want to have medical marijuana. I'm like, fine, sell it in Walgreens or Rite Aid, where we sell all pharmaceuticals. The reality of it is the federal government is absolutely, well, let me back up. I say the federal government. There's people that get elected to Congress. There's 435 of them. There's enough districts out there that don't want it at all, that their people were going to go in there and say, I'm never going to vote for it anywhere, no matter what state it is, because they never want to acknowledge that there's a problem here. States that have done it have the problems with the banking issue, which is a federal, because you're federally chartered institutions, and anyway even if you're not federally chartered, if you're moving money in the system, you're part of the system, and you can't do it because the feds say, this drug is a level 1, what's the word again?
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1, which just means no medicinal value whatsoever, highly addictive, it's the worst thing in the world. And other drugs that we hear about aren't, like again, OxyContin or something like that, which, radio talk show conservative toasts get hooked on it when they get a back pain because it is very addictive, right? You get an operation, it used to be you go to the doctor and you get your teeth worked on, they give you a little something, now they're giving you Vicodin. It's like, why am I giving a kid Vicodin? He got some teeth work done. So as a society, these things have been happening out there. Where the balance is, where the good, the bad, and all that, I think we've got some major problems with drugs. We look at the group homes the problems that we're having, which has more to do. I'm not here trying to be political about this, but Obamacare is funding massive amounts of this stuff, and all of a sudden we get a bunch of group homes in Costa Mesa because you can. They just do it. What's interesting is now that there's so much more money from the federal government funding it, when I would talk to other cities, say San Clemente, oh, we have a group home problem. How many group homes do you have? They go, oh, we got 3. I said, we have 100 and some, right? Go 6 months later, we got a big problem in San Clemente. How many you got? We have 100. Wait, I didn't know you guys had oh yeah, Dana Point. All these cities are getting it. Why? Because the funding's there for somebody to get in Obamacare or the Affordable Medical Care Act. It takes care of mental, help me guys. Medical treatment, psychological medical treatment, which means you can go to these places which fund it, and you can take your 30-day vacation from your life and your family, and leave everybody for a while. It's a problem, and drugs are a big problem in our society, but they're here, and so now it's a matter of kind of figuring out how we're going to work our way through that issue.
Jim, I'm going to go ahead and let candidate Lee Ramos take the next question, then I'll go over there.
Excellent.
Panel, thank you for being here tonight. Lee Ramos. You mentioned some numbers where you were distributing the money, and you mentioned $2 million would be going down. Is that the University of California at San Diego? Is that correct?
I believe,
Yeah,
I
that
make
was-
sure, yes, it
that
was.
was
Okay,
yes.
my question to you is, the testing that they're doing, is that state reported, or is it connected with the University of Mississippi in any way with the federal studies?
Well, we don't, it hasn't been enacted yet. That would be in Proposition 64, and it's just to study the pharmacological agent of THC. So that hasn't, I don't have the answer, perhaps. Do you have the answer? No. No.
Well, okay, so like with the seizures, the way they break apart marijuana, the oils you don't get high from. They do other things, so they're kind of trying to figure out how that works. And I'm not an expert, and I'm just kind of around enough people now. I'm getting to be an expert on it.
Well, there are some oils, depending on if it's.
Right, and
I've
I
learned what
again,
the term's dabbing
all I
and
know
all
is I
this
don't want the
means now.
city of Costa Mesa to have to go out there and test them and figure it all out, because we don't do that real well.
Next question.
Oh, yeah, so to the lady's point over there on the other side, I grew up in LA County, and this is in the 90s. My friends that end up in sober living homes did start off with marijuana at 14, 15. I know things have changed, things have escalated with kids taking their parents' medication and so forth, so that's what also kind of triggers the side effects of why we have people in sober living homes. My question to you is not the usage part of it, because I know we had a little bit of a controversy on Facebook, but my question is about how are we going to manage, I'm going to call it the curb appeal when it comes to advertising, when it comes to billboards, which I know is one segment, but also sidewalk spinners, car flyers, things that are going to be exposed to children. And I'm not saying that exposing children or educating children is bad or wrong, but I think it should also be handled properly, just like alcohol, cigarettes. I know in Denver, Colorado, the pioneers of marijuana did do a mutually exclusive agreement with the marijuana advocates to ban outdoor advertisement to control it. What is your answer, and how are we going to control it?
Yeah, so again, if Costa Mesa's passes, the one the city did, we're not going to have retail sales. So you're not going to see it. If the others two pass, then we're going to have to look at additional ordinance for exactly, I mean, I kind of thought about that, but I didn't think, there's going to be so many other issues to solve and to work on. I always love elected officials when they do these, we don't want it near our kids, so make sure it's 500 feet from the school. You really think that matters, but politically, you've got to say, I'm going to protect those kids 500 feet away from the school, somehow means something. I think it's been crazy, but the whole idea of advertising or put out there, or when you say advertising in the spinners, how about the glamorizing of it? Alcohol and cigarettes have been taken off of billboards and stuff because the glamorizing of it and the good-looking people and nice cars and all that kind of stuff. So there is a big issue with that. And we'll control it the best that we can, but then we get other issues if the feds don't come in, which is the freedom of speech, and what we're allowed to say can be on signs and can't be on signs. That's more of a federal issue than ours.
So how did Denver City Council overcome that then?
I don't know what the actual mechanism was, but sometimes it is the industry getting together with the state, and then everybody just kind of agrees they're going to do it a certain way, and whether it's going to actually be enforceable or not, who knows, but everybody just kind of agrees, and that's just how it ends up happening. But I don't know.
And if the adult use passes, there are advertising restrictions, like time, manner, place restrictions. It says billboards can't be on the highway, billboards can't be 1,000 feet within a school.
So there's 1,000 will work.
1,000 will work, 500. But it also has regulations for like broadcast TV, radio, and internet. It has to be calculated to reach an audience that's 72% over the age of 21. And they can't use any symbols or logos that could be perceived to appeal to children under the age of 21.
Just a quick question. You keep saying that we're going to get it regardless. My question is there mathematically a chance that it won't come here?
Well, I mean, there's two initiatives on the ballot in November. And I would say, again, mathematically could, look at our federal government who's running for president now. We're all it just is what we got, right? And so it's coming. When you look at the demographics in the city and you look at, there was a poll I just got today, 64.1% of the state's going to vote for the other initiative, 64.1. So is Costa Mesa, who's considered more liberal, more open, more libertarian, more government out of my way, vote for? Yeah, that's kind of the community that we have here. So yeah, it's going to pass. If the city's passes, at least for now, we will not have the dispensaries, which is really where all the issues are, more so than, you know, if you have a pharmaceutical manufacturer in your town, you don't think twice about it. They do whatever they do, and there's not sales. There's not people going in and out of it. It can only be business-to-business type transaction. So, again, you know, is who's going to win in the federal race, who's going to win here? I don't know. I just have to look at it as a public policy person and say, it's probably gonna. That's my judgment, and we better have something to defeat it or make sure people have a choice to say this is a better way to go. Otherwise, there's going to be 4 or 8 dispensaries open in the city that have very little control.
Yeah, but I'm just concerned because you say San Clemente will never have it, Huntington Beach will never have it.
Because they'll never vote for it. People in Huntington Beach won't, yeah. People on, oh yeah, people on Costa Mesa will. I'm just, it's just,
Based on how I haven't seen any.
they got the signatures very quickly,
Well,
they,
guys came to my house multiple times when I was.
Right.
And they didn't look like they were supporting the recreational use of marijuana.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, and listen, the medical part of it and getting the signatures for it, I've never fallen for that for 1 second. It is about recreational. It's always been about recreational. It's, you know, you need you know, I like when people say, well, you got to get a doctor's prescription. No, you don't get a doctor's prescription. You get a note from a doctor. Prescription is a federal word. It's a word that causes problems. They had people you could go and they tell you this guy over here can do it. The laws they're passing now are saying doctors, you know, they have to kind of have some sort of system in place. All states have looked at how they're going to solve their issue of the communities that are going to pass these things and put them forward. And you know what? I have been, you know, I'm a conservative Republican, conservative. I am closer to libertarian, but I do believe government should regulate certain things, okay? And if you don't have some regulations to do stuff, it's just the Wild West out there. So I'm not, you know, do whatever. But I have, you know, fought the battles that, you know, don't worry, you're somehow going to change it, and then John Wayne's going to show up at the end and fight it, and it doesn't happen. And as someone who has 3 daughters, I got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old, I am very concerned about having dispensaries in the community, especially before the states got their act together. And so I'm doing, as an elected official, what I think is the best to do to stop that portion now, to give people what they want, which is the medical research, and they talk about it on medical marijuana, and that's what some of these people that really got the signatures, some of them really cared about. The other ones just want the recreational. I agree with that. But I think I wouldn't have gotten involved in it. I have enough on my plate as it is. This $900 a month job is not that great, okay? I've got a family, wife, and kids, and a business to run. But it was, I think, my fiduciary responsibility to make the best decision was for the community. And, you know, I could, you know, well, I'm termed out, thank you, God. And, you know, I could have it used against me that I was for this or against it. I really don't care. I really want to do what I think is the best based on the choices that we have. And other communities are not going to vote for it. They're not. And my whole point is, oh, great. They're not going to vote for it because they can go just buy it in Costa Mesa, right? Why would I have it? I'm not going to. So am I thrilled about that? No. But I know, I think I know where the voters are going with this.
Thank you. Yes, Dorothy.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I got a little bit late, so I didn't hear all that the panel had to say. But I have worked as a school counselor here in Newport Beach, and I worked with kids in middle school that were particularly on pot. They love their marijuana and their spice, and so they would miss school a lot. So I was their counselor to help them with their grades and to want to get them to attend school and finish. It is anybody that says that marijuana is not a gateway drug hasn't really studied it. It definitely is. All the kids that I was counseling have all started out on pot, And they all had moved on, like Karen was saying, moved on to something else, Oxycontin, whatever like that. And interestingly enough, it was mostly family that got them into it, and it was like their cousin, their uncle, maybe their parent. Oh, come on, you know you want to try it. It's in the house, and some of which was medical marijuana, and they abuse it. They get it that way, but but they use it any way that they want to. It would be awfully hard for a kid to not do drugs when their parents are doing it or when relatives are doing it. So, excuse me. So my question too, and by the way, the one that's for seizures, from what I understand, it's the THC that isn't in it. The thing that actually gives the kicker. My question is this. This is from the kids after I've talked to them and taken a lot of notes, giving workshops, etc. They're taking this because it makes them feel good. Some of these kids cannot go to school because of the bullying or the intimidations that they feel at school. They don't feel safe at all. They go to school and they feel better because they toked up in the morning, or they took it to school and they took it, and they feel really good now. My question to myself in this society that would say to them, oh, here, kids, we really want you to take it. It will make it so much more available for you. Why are we teaching them, or why do we want them to have this fake, artificial self-confidence? I think that's what needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Question. All right, we have Dan over here.
Dan, I'm going to take the next question, okay? It's probably to Aaron. Jim, the Jims might want to jump in on this one. I'm concerned about crime, and I'm concerned that if we make it legal in California for adults to buy marijuana, and I guess they can put it in their pocket and carry it around, what happens if the drug dealer knocks on my door and says, hey, I'm delivering drugs today, you want any? If I buy it from him, have I broken the law? Has he broken the law? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to him? And is he going to be able to sell it to me cheaper than the dispensary? And if I call Jim's police department, are they going to come down and get this guy? Or what's happening here? From a criminal point of view, are we going to be safer or not so safe?
So you raise, those are all good questions. Under the way the laws are set up right now, if somebody just shows up to your door and is just selling you marijuana, it's a felony. It's illegal to engage in marijuana sales. These medical marijuana collectives, if they fall within the state medical marijuana laws, they have a criminal defense that they can assert at trial. But at the end of the day, marijuana sales is a felony, and it's still on the books. If the Adult Use Act passes, it changes things a little bit. It gives, depending on the facts and circumstances of the quote-unquote, unlicensed sale that would be going on, it gives prosecutors to charge that as a felony, a misdemeanor, or even an infraction, which is essentially a traffic ticket. So with adult use will come a great liberalization of the state marijuana laws that prevent sales, because ultimately, once you regulate adult use marijuana sales and someone's engaged in it, it's essentially just unlicensed conduct. We're saying this is okay if it's done within the state regulatory system. When somebody is selling marijuana door to door without a license, from a criminal law perspective, it's really just unlicensed activity, which will be charged and prosecuted at the discretion of the prosecutor. As far as whether or not that black market is going to thrive, or if it's still going to be around in whatever capacity, it's a balance. I think everybody agrees that there's this grand bargain where if we liberalize the marijuana laws, there's going to be all this great tax revenue that comes along with it, but the tax revenue isn't a cure-all for all problems, and ultimately you can tax it to the point where the black market is more attractive and nobody's participating in the state legal regulated tax industry. I don't know what that point's going to be for California, but these businesses are already being taxed like crazy because it's of the federal prohibition. Under I-280E, even legal marijuana businesses can't take standard business deductions. So they're essentially paying tax on everything minus cost of production, when you put on proposed state taxes, local and county taxes, these businesses are easily paying over 50% annually on their gross receipts, and with the number of proposed homeless taxes that are going to be tacked onto it, we could find ourselves in a situation where the black market is going to be much cheaper than the regulated market. Ultimately, that's going to be a decision for the governing bodies to determine where that line is supposed to be, to make sure folks are incentivized to participate in the legal, regulated, and tax system.
So the bill doesn't say anything about it?
About which aspect?
About the underground?
Well, the bill says that unlicensed sales can be charged as a felony, a misdemeanor, or an infraction based on the circumstances and at the discretion of the prosecutor.
Is Sharpnick going to enforce that? Is that going to be something that he has time to do?
What's the question again?
The bill also talks about the amount of marijuana you have if you're stopped. So you can have marijuana's been pretty much decriminalized in California if you have small amounts of marijuana. So people can still sell marijuana illegally. And when I talked to the district attorney, I asked him about this because we met with him and asked him what he thought. And he's against Prop 64, and the reason why is because they had the federal government come in and help close down all the dispensaries, and then we've allowed them to come back in California. So they're kind of at a standstill what to do, and they're kind of just backing off. And so there's not really public safety money for them to go after the criminal activity. And we know we have gang problems, and so I think it is an issue, and I think the price, there have been pricing problems in Colorado because there's increased competition. You've got to lower your price, and then eventually it's very difficult, and we're not even talking marijuana, just in general the underground economy. It's very difficult to run a business when you have someone else operating illegally. My husband had a retail store, the people across the street, you gave cash, no tax. It's very difficult when you're not playing on a level playing field, and so it is a big concern, and I think it's something that should be considered.
Great.
Oh, I lost.
Dan.
I'm sorry. Am I on?
Yes.
Mayor, did I hear you correctly when you said at a time when your city had some operating dispensaries that you saw an increase of marijuana in the high schools?
Yeah, anecdotal, I mean,
Is that
it wasn't like a study, but there was no doubt about it that we.
I got feel by walking around smelling.
Well, no, I know the principals, they're
Yeah,
friends of
me
mine, and they
too,
just
right.
say, hey, we got
Let
more
me ask you this,
locker
is that a
stuff.
good thing or a bad thing?
That's not a good thing, especially at the brain development age of kids in high school.
That's right. Younger kids, it
Right.
can turn them off, have interest in progress of any sort. Now, I was a CASA for 10 years with 3 kids in the foster care system. And when it drifts into those high schools, it drifts right into those foster care homes. And I want to tell you, it takes kids that a lot of them are under a lot of stress. They're marginal anyway. Takes away the initiative, the dropout rate in school goes right up. So I don't see the benefit of having more marijuana available, I don't think.
Yeah, and Dan, so in the initiative that the city has done, we're not going to have dispensaries selling it, but we are what do you call it, throwing a bone to the industry to say we'll help you with other things that you need, but we're not ready necessarily in the city to do it. So where you would be a person would vote against the initiatives to have dispensaries, we'd hope you look at the cities, which does not have dispensaries, but get our votes added up to that, because most votes wins. Whatever has the most votes is going to be the initiative that ends up winning. So we don't want to.
I'm opposed to it, period.
Yeah, so you would probably want to look at,
I'm a coach for Special Olympics, 10 years, 32 kids, losing my voice. Many of them have seizures, and I have packets of pills that I have to distribute during practices and when we go to tournaments, bunches. In 10 years I've been with them, nobody's given me a marijuana cigarette to give to one of those kids to prevent seizures. And I haven't run across.
you know, I don't know all that much about it, but they don't smoke it for the seizures. They use an oil.
If this state proposition passes, does that negate all the local items too?
So if the state Prop 64 passes, what about local items, local control?
Well, okay, so there's local control in the state, and the attorney can talk to that we have to do it. But by an initiative passing, the voters have voted for it, we're kind of in a weird situation. So if the one that says you're allowed to have 4 or 8 dispensaries for medical marijuana, the citizens have voted for it. And so, yeah, you'd have it whether the state one passes or not. If the state one passes, from what I understand, local municipalities can decide whether they want to enact dispensaries or any kind of business they're having. We're trying to find a place kind of down the middle of that road to say, we don't want the dispensaries yet until we see how the bumps get worked out with the rest of this thing. I mean, in the end, everybody's going towards this because there's a lot of money involved. I think 10 years from now, it's going to be like, you run a liquor store somewhere. It's not going to be all that profitable. They start to find that all the taxes, all the cost of doing business is going to happen out there. I think the sexiness of this thing may wear out. And hopefully, society will maybe look at this thing and say, maybe that was a rough experiment and it may take 10, 15, 20 years for us to figure it out. But the direction in the country and in California is going is it's going to get passed in many cities.
I guess my question is Sacramento going to decide how many dispensaries will we have and where, or are we going to decide locally?
Yeah, so the question is,
Go ahead and tell them what the state one is.
It's under both the state medical, and if adult use passes, the decision to have any marijuana business is a local decision. So if Costa Mesa votes and they say, we want no marijuana businesses, the state won't be licensing marijuana businesses in Costa Mesa. Both laws are premised on the applicant for a state license first obtaining some sort of local permit or other authorization that allows the applicant to engage in the activity.
There was a previous initiative that didn't get enough votes that was going to usurp local control, and that didn't get signatures. So I think that's where there could be confusion, that there was one before that was going forth, and it got, I think it was 1575, and it did not make it. So something to look for possibly
Yes,
in the
Tom.
future.
Yeah, hi, I've got 2 questions. The first is about the city's initiative. And I'm wondering, is there a limit to the amount of businesses that the city would allow and what that process to get that license is?
Okay, so there'll have to be some more ordinances to put in place. If it passes, it gets the most votes, and it'll be a basic conditional use permit. The come from that the city is going to be is that we don't say how many manufacturing companies can be in our city of legal products if it's considered to be legal. We don't look at how many pharmaceutical companies can be in there. So in that section of town only, businesses that work with marijuana can be there, and there's not a limit on the number of type. But remember, there is no sales to the public. It is
Right.
manufacturing. You can't put, so you talked about advertising, you can't put, marijuana something on the door. You can't be there at all.
But
It's
for-
only for processing or whatever they're doing.
And cultivation too?
No
No
cultivation.
cultivation.
No cultivation.
No.
Okay.
And quite frankly, the cultivation actually was 2 reasons. One, the water was an issue. But the other part of it is this is very expensive real estate to have it in there, and we don't want, high jobs and everything else to basically be used up for what I consider almost warehouse uses. But because there's such profit in it, maybe it would be, so we wanted to make sure we kept our more job-intensive buildings available for employees and not just some grow place. Put the grow place out in the desert somewhere where it's inexpensive real estate. Don't
Sure.
put it here in expensive real estate.
Okay, and with
Follow
the, one more thing. With the other 2 initiatives for the dispensaries, will they be allowed to cultivate?
I think they're allowed to cultivate, yes. And the part to look at in the 2 and to see is who qualifies to get those. And the reality of it is I don't know who those 8 organizations are, corporations, companies that can get them. But the rules were set up that the qualifications, the licensing you had to have happen, literally happened before the signatures were collected. And that nobody can qualify if they try to set up one of those businesses today of the ones that have the 4 or the 8. So whoever owns those entities that qualify for having this kind of license over here, an agricultural license over here, was all done. And so how it's set up is the ones that have certain dates go first. And so I don't know who they are, but they're already out there. They know who they're going to win. They probably help fund the signature gathering. That's probably not a fair or proper way to do it, but that's the way it gets on the ballot, and that's what happened here. So, in fact, the word that I heard was the person who did the 4 was upset because there were no spots left open in the 8, so he did the initiative for 4, so he made sure he had those next 4 spots. I don't know all the technicalities about it, and I've only kind of heard the stories, but That's how it's set up.
And I just want to repeat something, or just mention something about the city's initiative. This group, just by virtue of being here, seems like a pretty politically engaged group. And you may not need the explanation, but a conditional use permit is a difficult permit to obtain. It's completely discretionary by the planning commission. So if the city-sponsored initiative passes, it doesn't mean these businesses are going to be opening up as a matter of right. They still need to go through an intensive application process to make sure that the proposed land use is compatible with the site and the surrounding area, and there's public hearings on it in which the citizens can come out and voice their support or opposition to the particular process. So I think that's the trend most cities are moving to. Most cities who are choosing to regulate this type of industry or business want as much discretion and control as possible. 10 years ago, when cities tried to allow it, they just let businesses open up as a matter of right, and it turned out to be a disaster. From a governing standpoint, the CUP process is exercising as much control as possible by your local representatives, and it certainly, on the surface, seems a lot better than having 4 or 8 permits that are already spoken for.
Jim, I've got another question for you. I don't know if you drug test your officers or the people that drive vehicles within the city of Costa Mesa, but my question is, if the adult initiative is passed, and on Saturday night, when I'm off work, I'm doing marijuana, and then next Tuesday you give me a drug test, am I fired?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how the rules work, and I think I can just tell you, I go to Colorado a lot for business, and those stories are in the paper every single time of an employee did this, and I think Colorado, from what I read, is they're like, you failed the drug test, we don't care if you're not stoned when you came to work, you can't do that in this job. Now there's issues of they've lost their civil rights, and so that's going to keep on getting fought through, but those stories are in the paper every week in Colorado.
Aaron, and do you have anything? Is the initiative handle this? What's happening here?
I don't know specifically how the initiative handles this issue. I can say anecdotally, not anecdotally, but legally speaking, here in California, there is no protection if you're terminated for medical marijuana use, let alone recreational marijuana
So you can be
use.
terminated.
So you can be terminated. Medical marijuana patients, under the current status of the law, are not protected in the state of California. And this is just one of these issues where states are figuring it out as they go. In Washington, they set the threshold for THC in the blood system too low. To qualify as impaired. THC apparently stays in your system for a longer period of time, even if you're not high. And there was a tragic accident where someone was driving, he was not impaired at all, pedestrian illegally crossed the street, he killed him. And because he had THC in his system, he was deemed to be at fault for it, even though as a matter of law, he was deemed at fault because under the law, he was quote-unquote impaired, even though he wasn't impaired when he was driving, and he ended up being prosecuted for killing this pedestrian because he was in a technical violation of the law, even though he had smoked marijuana days before in the situation that Tom was proposing. So I think the overall message is, yes, we all agree as a matter of policy, we don't want impaired drivers out there. Whether or not folks get legal protections for their work, that's another issue for the states. But these are all brand new issues states are working out, and it's going to take time until all the policies are ironed out and workable.
Aaron, as somebody that's pro the initiative, state initiative, why don't we just wait until we figure these things out rather than ruin people's lives? Can you give me a good answer for that?
I think the initiative is going forward because folks in California are seeing the revenue that's generated in other states. And quite frankly, it took the state legislature almost 12 years to follow up on their 2003 marijuana effort. I think it would be another 20 years to come around and do a recreational marijuana effort. Sometimes business and industry and folks who are invested in this issue, they're moving a lot quicker than their elected representatives. And when you have the citizens and the people pushing these issues forward, the result is usually imperfect, and it will take time for the unintended consequences to be fixed, and that's more of a side effect of the initiative process, which, I think in this case is brought about because the state has been so slow to act for the last 20 years.
Somebody over here had a question?
Oh, sorry, thank you. My name is Randall Longworth. I don't have a question. I just wanted to, can I say something really quick?
Please do.
Thank you. This is just for everybody, and I've heard a lot of the comments here. What I'd like to do is just give a little bit of perspective, Orange County perspective, with regard to initiatives on marijuana and why I think the city is in the position that it is in right now. Cities are looked at by individuals in this industry because they do polls and they recognize a city that is very likely to have something passed in their city. The first one was Santa Ana. Santa Ana had an initiative, a citizens initiative on their ballot, and it was put on that ballot for an absolute reason, because polls were done and they recognized that it would pass in that city. The City Council of Santa Ana then had a choice, right? Maybe you want to call it a Sophie's choice, but they had a choice. Do they, knowing that the citizens of their city were likely to pass that citizens initiative that they didn't like, they had a choice. Put something up against it, or take their chances and roll the dice and see whether it was going to pass. They chose to put something to compete against that citizen initiative that they did not like. That was November of 2014. If you get 50% of the voters of that city, it will pass. If two of them are on there, and both of those get 50% or more, the one with the highest win. Santa Ana, it was 54% of the individuals, of the voting residents of Santa Ana voted for that citizen initiative. It passed. The city's initiative, the competing initiative that the city wrote, got 64.8%. Had they not put one on the ballot, that citizen initiative would have passed, and they would have been stuck with it. The City of Costa Mesa has chosen to do that. I wrote one of the initiatives that are on the ballot for Costa Mesa. I heard their concerns with what I wrote, and I recognized it. I've now withdrawn my support for the initiative that I wrote, and I'm now supporting something that the City Council of Costa Mesa has now written because they think it's a better choice for the citizens. I'm going to add one more thing. The City of Laguna Beach has a citizen initiative on the ballot right now. The City Council, and by the way, the polls in Laguna Beach right now are upwards of 70% for passage. They had a choice whether or not to put a competing measure against that citizen initiative, which they do not like. They chose not to do it. They will kick themselves. I guarantee you come November 8th, it will pass. So we've got Santa Ana, who they put up a city initiative to compete with the citizen initiative. Had they not done that, it would have passed. Laguna Beach, it will pass, and they will have something that they have no control over. I understand where the City of Costa Mesa is right now. They are put in a choice right now to do the best thing for their city. We've heard them, we recognize why they're doing what they're doing, and we recognize why they do not appreciate what we wrote. After hearing their concerns, we folded, we understand it. We want to make sure that the city has the best option possible. So I just wanted to make sure that that perspective as to what's going on, and I know we're sitting here talking about whether it's good or bad marijuana. The reality right now is this is going to be on the ballot. Something is probably going to pass in Costa Mesa. Whether you're for for marijuana or not, it's there, and something's probably going to pass. And I think that is where the City of Costa Mesa is right now, saying, hey, look, something is probably going to pass, whether you all like it or not. Maybe they had to plug their nose and write it, but I think they're doing what they believe is best for the city. After us hearing their concerns, I think we recognize it too. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Robert Taft. I'm the sponsor of the Initiative for 8. I'm a Costa Mesa resident. I live in College Park. I personally am voting no on AUMA. I don't want recreational use. My purpose is completely medicinal. I make tinctures. I make oils for children with epilepsy and cancer. One of them who is sitting over here and is 90% seizure-free. I hear a lot of the conversations that are going on here, and my question to this group is marijuana here? Before any initiative, before Santa Ana, before 1996, before any of us were born, marijuana's been here, and it's here. And we could bury our heads in the sand, or we could regulate it. We can give the power to the cartel, which they will use, or we can keep that power. So on November 8th, I'm voting no for adult use, and I'm voting yes for the cities.
I asked him, any final comments, anything that's moving you?
I've kind of laid out why the city did what we did. I would hope that there are people out there that will vote against the 4 dispensaries and the 8 dispensaries. And then just take your own choice on, we need to get the most votes to win. And like they said, once you get 50%, you win if the competing initiative doesn't have more votes. So I would hope there's people in between, and we think there are, that are against any kind of dispensary that will vote for the cities, knowing that it's most votes wins, and that the other 2 will probably pass. They'll get over 50%, but the city needs a higher percentage to pass to have an initiative in place that has some controls for the city. And again, no dispensaries, lab coat type people working in processing and research and those type of things, and not the sales to the public.
Great. Lisa?
And I would say, do your own research. I became very educated very quickly by going online, looking at different items. I had an opinion when I started. I have a little different of opinion now for my personal beliefs, but I do believe you have to get educated. What upsets me in the advertising for Prop 64, and I think, is that people are saying that we're going to get all this extra money in the general fund. It's going to solve all our problems. The way it's written now, it's not going to solve our problems. The money's going to go into a fund. Now, that fund may be used down the road for some wonderful purposes, but it's not going to bring all these tax revenues in to our state coffers to fix our roads and pay for our schools.
You mean the lottery money, like
yeah,
our
it's not going to
schools?
be lottery
Okay.
money. So as long as, and that's the only, and if you're for it or against it, that's for you to decide. And as representative of the Board of Equalization, I'm not going to tell you that answer, but just something to look at is the taxes.
Thank you. Aaron?
My final message, I don't have a stake in Costa Mesa. We don't have any clients here because there aren't any legal businesses, and I have nothing to do with your initiatives. I think the city's put together a fine initiative. I actually think it'll probably become a model for other medium-sized cities across the state to look at who don't want cultivation, who don't want dispensaries, but who still want to implement parts of the state law. I'm just happy to be here tonight, and it's really exciting to see everyone come out here to pay attention to this important issue, and ultimately, at the end of the day, whether it's state or local, it's in your hands, it's in your control, so I hope everyone votes, and we'll see what happens over the next few months.
Well, great. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for this being taped. Panelists, thank you for taking time out of your days and nights, and thank you to the Newport Mesa Tea Party.
Let's give them a big hand, you guys. I just got a text message that the delivery of the special goods was stopped, and he's now in jail. So I'm sorry we're not going to be able to have any samples to pass out.